Good evening, everybody. You are welcome back to our tutorials class on Southern African history in the 19th century. Today, we'll be focusing on Shaka and the Amazulu kingdom, having considered the Mfikani and the emergence of military leaders in Southern Africa. Do not forget to like, to share, and to subscribe to this tutorial session and propagate it for the benefit of other members of the class. The socio-political and military changes that swept through the region were best manifested under Shaka's rule, as we examined in our previous class. Shaka's relevance is not just in the socio-political transformation engineered by him or the military changes heralded by Swayo, which improved upon and perfected, as we have discussed in our last session, but also in the nature, the extent and the aftermath of Zulu eruption, which started during the era. The Zulu state under Sengagakona was one of the kingdoms subjugated by the Swayo's Metetua kingdom in the course of its expansion. We've noted that in our last session. Shaka, the illegitimate child of the illicit affairs between Sengagakona and Nandi, had difficult beginning and suffered some psychological taunting during the early years of his development. We also examined that in the course of our discussion. Although his parents, Shaka's parents, affair was later regularized, by marriage. Shaka and his mother were driven, to his mother's kinsmen because of her ungovernable temper. A major quality that Shaka was later to exhibit, in his political and military career in Southern Africa. For instance, at age 22, Shaka was conscripted into the Ginswayo's army and soon acquired a reputation for efficiency and for strength and for capability. So he thus rose to become a general and commander of a regiment in the Ginswayo's army, as we've discussed. For instance, in the land at the Cape was politically not enough to afford a loan farm of 6,000 acres, in return for annual rent, by the increasing number of European countries. We've noted explicitly that the strong scramble for land among the Europeans on the one hand and among the various Zulu and Nguni and Bantu people led to a lot of contestation over space and resources. Hence, the European settlers, by the time they decided to move into the interior in order to have enough land, either for agriculture or for other purposes, there was little resistance they encountered, as we've examined, as Omar Kopa highly rightly pointed out. The majority of the whites were farmers. This meant that as their population increased, they would need more land, for their expansion. So the vacant land in the interior was also an impetus and ready solution to the scarcity of land at the Cape. So with the death of Shaka's father in 1816, Shaka assumed leadership of the Zulu kingdom, with the aid of the Swayo. He therefore became the dominant figure in Zululand, which was still a tributary state to the Metetua sovereign country. Thus, in 1818, when Zwide, chief of Dwende, captured and killed the Ginswayo, a power vacuum was created. In the face of a disintegrating Metetua confederation, Shaka rose to fill this vacuum as he seized the opportunity to incorporate the remains of the Metetua kingdom into the rising Zulu empire. Conflict soon ensued between Shaka and Zwide. Okay. Furthermore, Shaka successfully uprooted Zwide attacking forces in 1820, and by 1822, Shaka had become the undisputed master of Zululand. So we can see the process through which Shaka consolidated his political aspiration. Without doubt, Shaka carried out several reforms that led to significant development in Southern Africa in the areas of military reforms and socio-political changes, as shall be discussed below. So let's look at some of the military reforms put in place by Shaka the Zulu. Even before the death of the Singwayo in 1818, Shaka had started substantial military changes within the Zulu land. So these changes were crystallized and extended in scope when he assumed leadership of the whole region. For instance, Shaka started by permanently rationalizing social institutions for military purposes. We mentioned that in our when we're looking at Mfikane. So this he did by adapting the Ginswayo's replacement of the age-grade social institution into serving a military purposes. So people who were, some of the ceremonial practices, were converted for military purposes, without ritual. So what he wanted to achieve was to build a formidable military, formation. Age grade regiments not only replaced age grade ritual system, but they spent more time in camps, for exclusive military. So during festivals and during initiation ceremonies, which used to be the norm in other African countries, Shaka converted all of those socio-economic, cultural reenactment, into for military purposes. So people were initiated, into cultural positions, but to serve military purposes. So these groups of newly trained young men were conscripted into standing army that could rise for to emergencies within a short notice. So in this way, virtually all able-bodied men in the society, adults, were members of his army. Shaka further went to establish barracks at strategic locations where his over 40,000 soldiers were quartered. So these are some of the remarkable changes brought, by Chaka the Zulu. Men under 40 years were confined in these barracks where military training continued and were made to live a life of celibacy until they were discharged from. They were not allowed to marry or to procreate because of the commitment, they made to the Zulu kingdom. So apart from the rigorous military training given to his soldiers, he proceeded to initiate some innovations in their fighting techniques and weaponry. So there were several investments he made in, procuring ammunitions and also, retraining, the military in proper military strategies. He also introduced the broad-bladed and short-stabbing spear to replace the traditional javelin, which often left warriors defenseless, in combat, in close combat. Shaka then, trained his army to use big shields in hooking away their enemies' shield, thus rendering them very defenseless. He also changed traditional method of warfare, from face-to-face confrontation to the use of on-formation tactics. These tactics were designed to circle the enemy with many troops in the center, and the reserves at the periphery. So those are the flanks that circle the enemy and kill them, as they concentrated. So it is one of those strategic military tactics that Zulu was able to initiate in the 19th century. It was Shaka, for instance, that also introduced the policy of total warfare as opposed to that of, limited aggression, which was either to prevalent among the southern Bantu people. This strategy was aimed at complete annihilation, of the vanquished in order to shatter their morale and dampen the thought of recovering and revenging against them. So it is therefore not surprising that those incorporated into Shaka's military regiment, according to the were according to various age grades. He also introduced and made ingenious use of spies, or what could be regarded as his secret police, the major means of, defeating their enemies. The spies kept him informed about the activities of key officials in states, and of significant events throughout the nation. Indeed, Shaka also began the establishment of an industry, for melting iron and forging weapons for war. In this regard, they were able to produce their local ammunition, through which they were able to overwhelm their enemies, while also providing farming and other utilitarian implements. With Shaka's efficient military setup, it became clear why by 1822 the extent of the territory under him was about 80,000 square miles. So this showed the ruthlessness and the devastating effect of Chaka's expedition on his neighbors and his enemy adversaries. Let's look at the socio-political changes brought, by Shaka. Shaka's effort at building a nation was unprecedented in the region, as we noted. Unlike the Ginswayo, who did not attempt to change the political organization of the conquered tribes, Shaka from the very beginning was bent on breaking up tribal organization and mixing their peoples, within one national framework. He was able to, agglomerate the people and also to ensure absolute loyalty. To this end, he made the tradition of Zulu the epitome of the Zulu nation. Zulu language, for instance, became the national language. So the political and social life in Chaka Zululand centered around the army. Like I've mentioned, every see that in terms of ritual, in terms of everything revolves around the army. People were trained in various fields of their endeavors, not only for their livelihoods, but basically for them to be able to render military support, in times of emergencies. So men under 40 years having been conscripted into the army. Women were also organized in parallel organizations, like that of the men. Occasionally, dances were organized to bring the male and female regiment together in a way to stimulate, to inspire them. So, in addition, weak and old men have no place in the kingdom. So that is to show the brevity and ingenuity of Shaka the Zulu. He considered old men and weak, and fragile, not very useful, to his military formation. In the administrative setup, military indunas replaced the traditional chiefs. As we've noted, he strategized his framework in a way that these indunas were Shaka's appointee. All those who serve as his lieutenants were previously political leaders that he subjugated, and they were given significant or strategic political positions in different provinces in the state. Dependence on the Indunas, of course, rendered all political councils obsolete, as he no longer relied on them to take political decisions. So they serve as his lieutenants and advisors, but he was the superior or the supreme leader. There were also subdivisions where he administered them by chiefs and headmen known loyal to him, who were not probably his relations. Some of them were his nominees, while others were through hereditary rights. So, however, the ultimate authority lay with Chaka. So the political system he erected was revolves around himself. His subordinate chiefs were required, although, to attend courts frequently in order to prevent teaming up against him. But no, he had absolute control. He could make absolute decisions. His law, and decisions were sacrosanct in the land. So in a way, the Zulu state was highly centralized. That Shaka ruled like an absolute monarchy. He was commander in chief. He was the sole source of laws. The highest court of appeal and the high priest. In all, it was all encompassing, all involving, and all embracing. So he made fear an instrument of nation building through the intimidation of the citizenry of his people. Of course, those whose loyalty to the state were suspected were put to death immediately. And his absolutism reached excessive dimensions towards the end of his tenure, his reign. So, of course, men were often seized and killed at the slightest excuses. Of course, when his mother died, it has been reported, according to Nzigwe, that when his mother died in 1822, about 7,000 people were said to have been killed as an act of national mourning. So this is to show the ruthlessness of Shaka as a ruler. Was so feared and so respected. In the same spirit, series of measures were imposed on the whole nation. Cows were not allowed to be milked or cropped, to be planted. This increased the hardship of his people as starvation stared them in the face in the midst of plenty. So the army had become too large, and with it, he unleashed reign of terror. In the sub-region, people grew weary of his tenure, of his rule, and when in 1828 he was assassinated by Dingane and Milange. All right, it was a very, very good riddance of a leader who has overstayed his usefulness. He was feared, and he was also cherished. In conclusion, Shaka and his method of building his kingdom have not lacked its defenders. Some argue that his method was that which the time required, particularly a period when the Boers hostility was very, very high, when there was need to check the SS, to resist the incursion of the Europeans. So some scholars have argued that his method of building his kingdom was that which the period required, and it has been said in his favor that there was no alternative to the use of Shaka's method during the time he built the Zulu nation. Although the price was heavy, his achievements in nation building in Southern Africa were very, very considerate. In less than 10 years, with less than 2,000 soldiers, he built an army numbering about 40,000 soldiers by 1828. That is to show the bravery and the intelligence of this traditional pre-colonial statesman. In spite of European incursion into Zulu territory, the Zulu nation maintained its identity until 1884, when the British penetrated into the area. Part of the explanation for its long existence as a sovereign nation was the result of the military strength and the development of national pride and dignity among the Zulu. This development started during Zulu's era. So, in a way, we can say that Shaka emergence in Southern Africa was a response to the socio-economic and political development in the 19th century, occasioned by the infiltration and the dispossession of his people by either the hegemons, the Bantu groups, and also the Boers. Thank you very much.